Welcome to Buckets. This is Action Network's basketball betting podcast presented by BetMGM. And this is going to be the WNBA Finals in review episode. We got a lot to talk about. My name is Maria Marino, joined once again by Action Network writer Jim Turvey at Turvey Bets on Twitter and the Action app. So, Jim, you and I were both at Barclays Center once again for Game 4. And what a game it was. We finally got the close game that we have been pining for between these two teams, but it did not go the way that maybe some expected it to go, with the Aces shorthanded and finding a way to squeak by in Game 4 and win a back-to-back title.
Yeah, I think some things went a lot like we anticipated. I think the Aces offense without Chelsea Gray definitely struggled. But I think you have to just give immense credit to A'ja Wilson with, I think, one of the best two-way performances in a closeout game that I've ever seen. I mean, was it 22 and 16, 24 and 16? But she carried the load offensively, and she made the best player on the Liberty this finals just disappear. Jonquel Jones really didn't do anything all game. She had that putback that happened about a half second after the buzzer that would have solved everything for her. Mm-hmm. if she'd had that. It would have been a great game because you get the game winner. But A'ja Wilson, I think there was a lot of chatter about MVP before this. I think you and I have talked about how good of a job Becky has done at motivating them. But I think let's not take anything away from A'ja here. She got up for this game clearly. She played almost the entire 40 minutes. Kelsey Plum did play all 40 minutes. And the Aces defensively, I think we both thought there were going to be some matchups that the Liberty could have taken advantage of. That really didn't happen.
You're right.
The Liberty had a decent first half, but that second half, they really struggled to get into any offense. It was Vandersloot who was the leading scorer. And even she, honestly, she missed one wide open layup. She almost missed another. She missed several. Like she was only the leading scorer because the Aces were like, you will be the leading scorer. She looked hesitant still at times. The defensive game plan from them and the defensive effort was just amazing. And, I think it was something that we saw kind of after Game 2. It feels a lot like after Game 2, to be honest, where it's like the Aces just kind of seemed like they got up to a high, were able to get up more than the Liberty. And, I think, we talked after Game 3, it's like, okay, maybe there is some regression back. And, but the thing that I missed in the cap, and I definitely, in reflecting, want to think about this going forward as well, is just that there can be gaps in effort level and motivation, even in the finals, even if that seems like a crazy statement to make. I think it was pretty evident that was a difference in the finals this year.
Well, you talk about the energy and the Aces sort of getting up for games more so than the Liberty. And I think a big part of that is feeding off of their MVP in A'ja Wilson. You mentioned the 24 and 16, playing 39 minutes. And I'll say this, with the game on the line in the fourth quarter, she willed them to victory. She put her head down and attacked the rim at every possible opportunity. She was taking shots, even bad shots, and she was making them because of that sheer willpower. And it's a lack of aggression that we saw on the Liberty throughout most of this series, where, when you're not the aggressor and you're not making the officials have to make decisions, most of the time you're going to lose. And you juxtapose what A'ja was able to do with what Stewie was unable to do. And the contrast is stark. It's unfortunate because we both agree that the regular season is a different animal and the MVP was a regular season award. And that we all felt that, A'ja Wilson, Breanna Stewart, and Alyssa Thomas were each deserving of that award for their own reasons. But A'ja clearly took that snub to heart, and she just had an unbelievable postseason run, whereas Stewie struggled more than we've ever seen her struggle in a postseason. And there was a stat from Kevin Pelton that you and I both kind of flagged. I want to point out. So her effective field goal percentage, Breanna Stewart, was at 38, the lowest of any 10-game stretch in her career. And effective field goals count three-pointers as 1.5 field goals for the added value. And the next lowest was 40%, and that was when Breanna Stewart was a rookie. So this was a very uncharacteristic postseason run for them. And, when your star and your go-to player is struggling, last night she was 3 of 17 from the floor. It throws off how this team was built and constructed and how it was designed to flow. But I don't want to harp on that too much because, I do want to celebrate the Aces here and what they were able to do. First back-to-back champion that we've seen in the WNBA in over 20 years. There's only 3 teams that have ever done it: the Comets, the Sparks, and now the Aces. So you are in a position here to build a dynasty. Your core is super young. And how about this? Another thing you and I completely underestimated going into the series, the coaching mismatch. I like Sandy Brondello, and she is a great coach. She is a championship caliber coach. But Becky Hammon put on a clinic in this series, both in terms of game planning and in-game adjustments. You and I talked about it. So game 1, Libs are leading at the half, and they get blitzed in the third quarter. Game 2, the Liberty are starting to find momentum in the second quarter. They're within reach. Blitzed again in the third quarter by the Aces. Like whatever was said at halftime was executed flawlessly. And then here again last night. So I heard, I don't know if this is true or not, I heard Greg Popovich was around and, helping Becky Hammon scheme. I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. And you had a situation where your 6-person rotation was down 2 key players, 2 key pieces. And, she slides Kayla George into the starting lineup. Alicia Clark, normally 6th person of the year, into the starting lineup. They got valuable minutes from Sid Colson, in my opinion, even though she had, I think, 5 fouls in 15 minutes. That was perfect. That's what they needed. They needed those fouls from her. They just needed those minutes and her to be disruptive. And, they did that. And then, George, I thought, wow, stepping up. I mean, she should feel so proud about this title because, she missed, I think she took 10 3-pointers. Doesn't matter. She made 3. That's all they needed from her. And she did her job. So, it's a shame in the sense that we don't get a decisive game 5, but it was such a great game. It was such a nail biter. The Barclays Center crowd, shout out to the fans. They were phenomenal. Loudest I've ever heard that arena. And I've covered a lot of Nets games, including playoff games. So that atmosphere was just, it was electric. You texted me the second you got in the building, it's electric already. So, just a couple of things, I wanted to mention there. And then, let's talk about the end of game sequence if you're ready to move on.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, because couple things. First of all, what I was struggling to figure out throughout the game, tell me if you noticed anything in particular. Like, how was it that Jonquel Jones was so neutralized? Like, was it just what you were saying? Was Asia just, stepping up? Was the team, the team definitely stepped up defensively, but Jonquel was the best, most consistent player on the Liberty throughout this postseason. And she was, I was like, she wasn't even on the floor. Like there was nothing, she did a lot of good things, but it was like, she was contained. And so I was wondering that, especially in the fourth quarter, as the Aces are, building a lead here. But then, the Liberty gets some timely buckets. I know they had, I think the last field goal of the game was Sabrina to get it within 1. They get a turnover. The Liberty actually force a turnover with, and they get it across half court with 8.8 seconds left on the clock. Now, I know hindsight's 2020, but I swear to you, in that moment, I thought to myself, don't call a timeout. Just go. Just let it rip. The defense is on its heels. It's the best chance you're going to have to score. But alas, I understand why Sandy called a timeout, because if you didn't call a timeout and you didn't get something, it would have been, why didn't you call a timeout, right? So I get both sides. But as soon as she called that timeout, they had some momentum there, like I said, off that turnover. But whatever, she calls the timeout, and I'm worried. As a as a Liberty fan, as somebody that was like hoping for a game 5, you know, I'm like, I don't think this is going to work out, because the Liberty were having trouble executing all night. And that we talked about the Stewie struggle. So I'm thinking to myself, no matter what she draws up, like, it's not going to be easy to execute here. And sure enough, Breanna inbounds the ball. It's shaky as anything. You know, it's jostled by Stewie. She gets the ball down. She's got the one-on-one for a moment, and she passes the ball to, I believe, Benajelani, who tosses it to Stewart, and no time. You know, Stewart didn't get a great look, and then no time. Aces win. You know, and I just wanted a quick reaction of your perception of that sequence.
Yeah, I actually think that final sequence does a really good job encapsulating the difference in the series. So on two fronts, kind of. One being the coaching front. I'm actually a little bit surprised. It seems like a lot of very smart people whose opinion I respect and are close to Liberty think it would be kind of crazy to let go of Sandy Brundell. I personally think she was outcoached vastly in this series. And maybe that's like the difference is like Sandy's an A- and Becky's an A+, and they're both very good coaches, right. But Becky's just in another atmosphere. But that final play call, you know, there was a little bit of, there was like an initial like kind of soft screen to get Stewie around the like wing, but like I would have liked something. You know, I was talking to Calvin Wetzel, one of our favorites here, about, you know, she had an ATO earlier in the game that really got Stewie kind of going towards the basket. Now, maybe the thought is with 9 seconds left, you don't want to go right at the basket, but you got to score. And yes. Allowing her to be out on the perimeter, something I noticed all game is it seemed like the Liberty, they really didn't match up. There was a lot of dribble handoffs on the perimeter in a game where they should have had the size and strength advantage. You know, one of either Stewie or JJ should have been able to go into the post and had success. And that the Liberty really struggled to get them the ball in those positions. It seemed like both players didn't really want to be in those positions. And that's the second half of what I thought was noticeable on that final play is Alicia Clark was going to win the battle for position. She was not going to let Stewie get in the post. And, you know, Stewie is an incredible player, but I think there was a little bit of a dog difference. And I think we highlighted it with Chelsea Gray at the start of the series, but I think it goes up and down the roster. And it did seem like there was, you know, what's surprising to me about that is that the Liberty have players who have been here before. So I don't know. This is kind of like that armchair psychology thing. And sometimes we tend to hyper focus on in the finals, it's under such a microscope, but it really, I don't tend to find myself going towards that type of analysis. And I found it to be noticeable during the series that there was just kind of it seemed like the Aces weren't going to get pushed around and they were doing the pushing around. And on that final play, you saw Stewie get pushed out to the point where she was, you know, she wasn't in full control of the ball when she caught it. And then she had terrible position to attack the basket, and it allowed them to be in a position to help and swing and move their defense really well. So you have hindsight. I know it's asking a lot, but I think if Laney had faked that pass to the corner, the defender might have been on the move enough for her to get a clean look and maybe with a little bit less rush than Vandersloot. But again, you're not putting your team in a great position to have to make such a quick decision like that.
Make a decision in real time. And the point is she made her bed when she said, I'm going to Stewie. I'm going to my MVP, even though she's been off all night. So the first problem was Stewie passing off the ball. Actually, sorry, that was the second problem. The first problem, to your point, was that the Aces were denying that position, right? They're denying the Liberty the ability to get to the spot that they want where they're comfortable. I would have preferred to see a play that was a little more dynamic, a little more creative, have somebody going downhill, cutting to the basket, as opposed to catching the ball back to the basket, which maybe wasn't necessarily what they wanted to do, and then having to make a post move or a post adjustment. So yeah, I would, obviously there's I think some critique fairly to be had there. And then, you know, in terms of Sandy Brundello as a coach, and you touched on, like, you know, her future, I understand why, like, you know, some people are like, you know, does she deserve to be let go? I don't think she does, personally. But also the other part of it is, who are you going to get that's better? To me, I don't think there's anyone else out there that's better. It just so happens that, to your point, Becky Hammon is one of the best basketball minds on the planet.
Yeah.
And that includes men's basketball, college and pros, all of it. So, hat tip to her. And then, and going along with that, I do think there's something to be said for the confidence that instills in your team. So yeah, the Aces have every right to be confident and have that dog and have that belief because of what Becky is setting them up to do. And so I do think there's something to be said for that, with Sandy. But that being said, this was a franchise that made a really big jump. They won a playoff game last year for the first time since 2017, and they jumped to the finals. And so this is, I think they're in a good place moving forward.
Can I, while we're doing a more Liberty-centric part of it, I wanted to ask you, I know JJ and Stewie technically are now not under contract. Do you think there is any way that either or both could be on the move, or you think that was just how it made the most financial sense and that they're going to try and run this back with pretty much the same team?
To be honest with you, I haven't wrapped my head around that quite yet. And we'll of course revisit some of these things in the off season. But I believe that Stewie was almost kind of pulling a LeBron, where it's like, okay, we'll just do a 1-year contract from now. But I think there's every intention that she comes back. And then JJ, I just, having already moved from Connecticut, I doubt personally that she'd want to jump ship again. And I do feel that this roster right now is probably still the best chance you have of contending with the Aces. But, in terms of the future, you and I have touched on this in the past, like nothing's a given. It's really hard to get to a final. And you have a couple of players on the Liberty that are older than some of the key pieces on the Aces. So, Courtney Vandersloot, I think at times has looked a step slower than maybe she has in the past. Even Stewie is older than Asia Wilson. So, definitely some things to consider. I know Laney's under contract. I know Thornton's under contract moving forward. So there's that. But yeah, I was just going to say too, like, in terms of just to kind of button up the coaching thing, I just don't know who else would be better. And I would love to see this matchup again. But what else is there anything else we need to touch on from Game 4 specifically?
Well, I wanted to touch on you brought up the Kevin Pelton tweet, and I wanted to just add one more thing to the Breanna Stewart thing, because I think it is one of the strangest things, and I very actively try to avoid the comparison to NBA. I think the WNBA does great on its own. We don't really need to compare to the NBA. But what jumped out to me in this finals, what came to mind was LeBron James against the Dallas Mavericks. That first kind of the LeBron down, the year he melted down. Because to be honest, I have never seen something like this.
But he had never won at that point.
That's the strangest thing is she has won at every level, and she has the pedigree is there. So it kind of defies
logic,
sense of logic, except to say this Aces team is incredibly well coached defensively. Alicia Clark, whose name hasn't come up, there was a small part of me that, and I really wish I had said it now, is that I was thinking Clark is going to get the start in Game 4. She really gives Stewie trouble. The only thing I thought was this is a big game Stewie's going to be up for. I think Clark, if she's not in contention for a Defensive Player of the Year next year, I think that might be something, if we get that award to bet before the season. Sure. I really, maybe it's like a perfect matchup. She kind of can use her physicality, and she's played with Stewie in the past. She knows her ins and outs. But that Clark performance defensively, I think we both think maybe something was up with Stewie. I don't know, but yeah, I think that takes a bit of what Alicia Clark was doing away from her, and that's just an incredible effort, incredible coaching to do what really defies any sort of logical sense.
I'll say this, Jim, I don't want to take anything whatsoever away from the Aces. They were phenomenal defensively this entire series, and especially Alicia Clark. I'll just say that, Stewie was struggling before the series with the
Yeah,
Aces. She was struggling against Washington, did not shoot the ball well in either of those games. Struggled in game 1 against Connecticut. She had more games in the postseason that she struggled than she didn't.
it's
And
very true.
so, and I certainly don't want to speculate on any front, but there are sometimes things going on with athletes that we just don't know about. So
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe there's something personal. I know her wife is expecting their second child very soon. I can't pin any of it on that, but I'm just saying, like, there's something, she was just off. She was just a little bit off. But that being said, she's the first player that the opponent's going to game plan against, and they were able to do that, especially the Aces.
Well, and
So
can I hop in for one more? While we're
sure.
giving credit to the Aces, I did want to bring up one part of this that is so impressive, and I think kind of goes under the radar. I don't know if it's, I do know that Mark Davis puts about as much money and effort and attention into this as any owner. And I really think that there's a lot to be said for this team's like conditioning and health. I know ironically that the health almost looked like it burned them for a second here, but their big four missed a total of 2 games combined the entire season. Kelsey Plum played 40 minutes tonight. They had multiple times where players were playing 38, 39. Their rotation was 6 deep at best. Like, the conditioning of this team and the ability to stay healthy through that, again, this was another game where they were taking it to the Liberty. This should be the point in the series where they're exhausted because they have the far shorter rotation. It's incredibly impressive. I don't know if that's the players themselves. I don't know if that's conditioning. I don't know if it's coaching. Whatever it is, it's worth mentioning as they go back to back for the first time in 2 decades. First team to do so.
I appreciate that you brought that up. I think it's a great point. And it's not just the Aces. Both the Aces and Liberty have ownership groups that are extremely serious about investing in their players and their facilities. Both of them opening new, beautiful training centers and locker rooms here within the last couple of years. And so, you mentioned the conditioning. I think that's huge. You show up to work and you feel, inspired to be your best and to be in the best shape that you can. And notably, I don't remember any truly significant injuries on the Liberty aside from Dolson missed a bit of time. And then you also had JJ early in preseason. She had a bit of a stress fracture, which might have contributed to a bit of ineffectiveness in the first half. But beyond that, I mean, up until game 4, we had both teams healthy, and in a great place. And it's no coincidence that these 2 teams are in the finals, because without that ownership investment, you're not attracting the top free agents. And that includes the Aces and Alicia Clark and Candace Parker, who obviously, couldn't participate in the playoffs. But I think it's very, very important. And it's a reason why I think both of these teams are probably going to be contending again next year. So should we get into a quick preview of what the title odds are looking like?
Yeah, hyper quick look at next year. Why don't you do title odds really quick? I'll just say we only have title odds out. We don't have any like awards or anything. Those won't come for a while. But I do think with a long-term lens to MVP, I think it would be very surprising if Asia didn't win next year. And I can almost say with certainty Stewie will not win next year. But I think Stewie will still be priced in like the top 5 because it's hard for books to really capture that narrativization of an award. So that might be a fun playground to play in, just because there is no planet in which I see Stewie having that performance during the finals, losing specifically to her rival, and winning a back-to-back MVP. So I think she's going to be priced in like the top 3 or 4. And just ignore that. Bet the rest of the ballot if you want, because that's not happening again.
And I should say too that, so let's like just do a quick recap here, because going into the series, the Aces were favored, and the Liberty going in were at like plus 170. Obviously, that fluctuated throughout the series after they went down 0-2 and whatnot. And we, saw some value on the Liberty, which I don't think we were too far off base. But let's just reiterate that the favorite won, the Aces, and the favorite for finals MVP won, so it had up until Wednesday night, Jonquel Jones was having a phenomenal series, and she had definitely had a great shot to win Finals MVP. But that is not what transpired, because the Aces found a way, and congratulations to them. And I want to mention this as well before we get into the title odds. This was a huge year for WNBA and for betting in particular. And we started this portion of the podcast. We had buckets previously, talking NBA, usually with our colleague Matt Moore, who's phenomenal, and Brandon Anderson is on that a lot, and they've been huge supporters of ours. So thank you guys. But WNBA betting content on Action Network is up nearly 200% year over year, and I've seen figures from sportsbooks of year over year increases of over 100% in terms of the handle that's being bet, how many people are betting, new bettors, new actives in the space. So that's really awesome. And so we're going to have a lot more of this to do. But before we go, we got Aces next year to win the title at plus 120 or so, Liberty plus 240, Wings and Sun tied at plus 1,000, Mystics at plus 1,900. Don't know if I would take that bait again, because I did that before this season, and well, they were riddled with injuries, so I might be a little afraid. Fever and Lynx at plus 2,900.
Yeah, so I would not advise anyone to lock up their money on either the Liberty or the Aces right now. Mostly because, as we saw this year, you can kind of, like, the Liberty is the team that I was on before the season, and you could have gotten an even better number right before the final. So don't lock up your money for 6 months. Those two teams we know are probably going to be in the conversation. What I think you might want to do is these really long shots are the ones where you might be able to get some movement that could be a chip for later on, because they're in the semifinals and allows you to hedge out or something like that. So the great thing that isn't all that great about the WNBA is it doesn't get as much attention paid to it. So if you are hawking, if someone gives a soft release of, hey, Skylar Diggins-Smith is really looking at joining the Connecticut Sun, something like that. Sure. Or maybe even better, is looking to join or is coming back to the Phoenix Mercury. You can kind of get that scoop before the books have adjusted their numbers. And I think a couple of these long shots, I think both of us probably think that Aces and Liberty Part 2 is decently likely. But those chips are great to have if you're sitting on, Seattle Storm right now are the longest. They're 65-1. If you're sitting on a Storm 65-1 and maybe they make some big moves in free agency, they already have Jewel Lloyd and Ezzie Magbegor. They've got a decent core. They pick up a couple big names, and you're sitting on 65-1. Even if they lose to the Liberty or the Aces in the semifinals, you've been able to leverage that position. So pay attention to W News. There's amazing people doing the work out there. Find them, follow them, and you can beat the book to moving the number. You absolutely can do that. So I would say don't hop on the big names yet. You can wait that out. You can honestly get it at almost the same price right before the finals. Look at some of those longer names if they scoop up key free agents, or if a top draft pick, if either an Angel Reese or Caitlin Clark says they're coming out and they land.
The draft is going to be so.
There's a lot of moving parts here, and you can often get there before the books do. So I think that we don't need to do anything today. I'll put it that way, but also we should always be on the lookout. So
real quick, do you have a number for the Chicago Sky?
They were 45-1, I believe.
All right.
Plus 4,500.
I'll just say this. Teaspoon, love the hire. I wouldn't be surprised if she attracts a good free agent or two. Maybe Sky Dig, love that. So something to keep an eye on. And pay attention to women's college basketball this year, because one, you'll thank me later. It's going to be an amazing year with some really big star power. And we'll see who ends up declaring for the draft. But the next year or two, it's going to be a big influx of talent. We already know that the WNBA is expanding its number of teams. So it's going to be so good. But I gotta say goodbye for now.
Sad.
I know this was our inaugural season of doing WNBA specific episodes here on Buckets via Action Network. Thank you to everyone who listened all season long. Thank you to Jim Turvey, because you did more episodes with me than anyone, and I couldn't have done it without you. You're incredible. If you're not following Jim already, it's at Turvy Bets on the Action app and Twitter.
Thanks for inviting me. This was always a pleasure. So
I'll thank a few of our other key contributors that helped this go. Dano Mataya, love you, homie. Brian Fonseca here at Action Network. Jay Money. Also, huge thanks to David Payne, our audio editor, who made sure to get all these podcast episodes up for us throughout the season. Thank you to our video team at Action Network who would put these episodes up on YouTube for us. Thank you to Matt Mitchell and Katie Richcreek for this opportunity. You were open to it from the jump, since I joined Action Network earlier this year, and I appreciate it so much. And once again, just one more shout out to our NBA crew, especially Matt Moore and Brandon Anderson, for all the support throughout the season. I know you guys are going to crush it during NBA. I may make an appearance or two at some point. So thank you for listening to Buckets. It's been a ride, and we look forward to more. We'll be back in the off season.